Grabbing only my important things, I quickly run out of the house and dash down the crowded streets toward the train station. I hurry up the station stairs and stand on the platform, anxiously waiting for the train to my hometown. I glance around nervously, wondering if anyone is following me, but I don't even know what I'm running from. I'm confused about why I had to abandon the honeymoon I was excited about and end up running away. But I'm doing this because I trusted my husband, who told me to leave immediately. My name is Megan, and I'm a 30-year-old office worker. Even though I often feel like a newcomer at work, I somehow ended up in a position where I teach others and lead a busy life. I'm engaged to Bob, and we're supposed to get married next year. Bob is my co-worker, and is 3 years younger than me. He's mature and dependable, so much so that my colleagues sometimes joke we can't tell who's older. He's trusted by both his bosses and teammates and handles household chores perfectly. To me, he seemed like the perfect partner to marry. Except for one thing. One weekend, we went to visit his parents' house together. When we stepped into the living room, I noticed 2 women sitting there, sipping tea. "Welcome home, Bob. Welcome back, Bobby," they said cheerfully, completely ignoring me. Bob sighed. "Why is Catherine here again?" he asked. His mother smiled and replied, "Catherine is like a daughter to us, isn't she?" Catherine chimed in, "Oh, if I become Bobby's wife, I'll really be your daughter." The 2 of them laughed together while Bob sighed again. I suddenly wanted to leave and go home right away. Catherine is a neighbor of Bob's parents and has been his childhood friend since they were babies. They were close all the way through high school. She has beautiful eyes, a slim figure, and knows how to act cute, making her the kind of girl many men find hard to ignore. For some reason, Catherine became obsessed with Bob after he told his parents about our engagement. She started sending him lots of texts, inviting him out for drinks, and saying things like, "I'll be so sad if you get married, and then you proposed to me when we were little." I felt uncomfortable with how aggressive Catherine was, so I asked Bob if he was interested in his cute childhood friend. Bob frowned and replied, "She dated 5 guys at the same time on the soccer team in high school. In college, she only dated men who already had girlfriends or wives. I'd never marry someone with no sense of loyalty like that." "You're right," I agreed, feeling shocked at Catherine's behavior, but also relieved that Bob wasn't interested in her. However, my mother-in-law is completely on Catherine's side. She's been trying to push me out by flaunting how close she is to Catherine. She doesn't like me because I'm older than Bob, taller, and work hard for a living. She seems unaware of Catherine's wild behavior and thinks that Catherine, who appears elegant and obedient on the surface, would be an easy daughter-in-law to handle and show off. Because of these 2, our wedding a month later turned into a nightmare. Unbelievably, Catherine, who wasn't even invited, showed up at our reception wearing a pure white dress, even though it wasn't as fancy as a bridal gown. The fact that she wore white didn't change. She drew all the attention in the venue for all the wrong reasons. To make things worse, she boldly sat at the family table during the reception. During our wedding reception, I couldn't help but notice Catherine chatting happily with my mother-in-law, even when our slideshow and speeches were going on. At one point, they came over to our table, and my husband tried to keep calm as he spoke to them, but I could see how upset he was. "Catherine, you weren't invited. You're wearing a white dress and sitting at the family table. What are you doing? And Mom, what's going on?" he asked. Catherine just smiled and replied, "It's my childhood friend's wedding. I have to be here to celebrate, and white looks the best on me." "Oh, I agree," my mother-in-law added. "White really suits your fair skin, and you look the best in the room. I asked for the seat because they forgot to reserve one for you. Don't worry, we're just sharing the meal." My husband looked down, frustrated and helpless. His dad, who was also at the family table, glanced at us apologetically, but I knew he wouldn't speak up. He's a good man, is too timid to stand up to his wife. We had been planning and looking forward to this day for almost a year. It was so heartbreaking to see it turn out this way. I wanted to cry, but I knew crying would only give them the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I wasn't going to let them have that. Instead, I lifted my head and smiled at Catherine. It's so kind of you to come celebrate. Even though you weren't invited, you're such a thoughtful friend, I said sweetly. Catherine's smile twitched a bit. Oh, and it's really nice of you to share your meal. Why don't you also share half of your favorite filet mignon? I continued, keeping my smile. My mother-in-law looked uncomfortable and avoided eye contact. Before they could respond, I said, "Excuse me, it's almost time for me to change into my second dress, so please step aside and the bride. After all." I kept a calm smile as I turned to the wedding staff member beside me. The attendant caught on quickly and said, "Can we please let other guests have a chance to take pictures with the newlyweds?" She politely guided Catherine and my mother-in-law away from the table. I was grateful for her quick thinking. Catherine glared at me for a second, but then switched to a fake, sweet smile and laughed. I'm not the type to break down and cry. Thanks to the amazing staff, the rest of the reception went smoothly. I was exhausted, but aside from those two, I received so many genuine blessings from everyone else. I could really feel the happiness of the day. After the wedding, we didn't move in together right away since we were waiting for job transfer announcements. So, for our honeymoon 2 weeks later, we planned to leave from our separate homes and meet at the airport. It felt like we were still dating, and I thought it would be fun to keep the excitement of seeing each other. Our honeymoon destination was Italy, and I was being excited. It was my first time traveling overseas, and I spent every day leading up to it thrilled and imagining the beauty of Venice, the delicious pasta, and the desserts. But everything changed on the day of our trip. While I was double-checking my suitcase to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything, I got a call from my husband. "Hey, what's up? We're meeting at 1 p.m. Right," I said casually. But his voice was frantic. "I'm sorry, we have to cancel the honeymoon. Please don't come to the meetup spot." "What?" I was shocked. "Listen, don't leave the apartment. No, actually, leave right now and go back to your parents' home, please." "What's going on?" I asked, completely confused. "I'll explain later. Just leave now," he said and abruptly hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling lost. What was happening? Was my husband involved in something dangerous? Just thinking about it made me shiver. With my heart racing and legs shaky, I forced myself to pack up and head to my parents' house as he told me. When I arrived, my parents were alarmed to see me, pale-faced. Instead of heading off to my honeymoon, they were even more worried because they remembered the drama with my mother-in-law at the wedding. I didn't know what to say since I didn't understand the situation either. Then, I got a call from an unknown number. My heart dropped. It was the police. "Hello," I answered, fearing the worst. "Ma'am, we received a report about 2 women screaming and banging on your apartment door. We took them into custody. The older woman claims to be your mother," the officers explained. "What?" I exclaimed, putting the call on speaker. My man, who was sitting beside me, shouted, "That's not me." The officers paused, clearly confused by my mom's voice, and I realized who it was. My mother-in-law, and Catherine was probably with her. I didn't understand why they would come to my apartment on the day of our honeymoon, but I knew now that they were the reason my husband was panicking. Because of them, our flight was already gone. No Venice, no pizza, no pasta, no tiramisu, all gone. My dream honeymoon was ruined. I felt like screaming. "Those people were complete strangers," I told the officers firmly. From the phone, I could hear my mother-in-law yelling, but the officers quickly wrapped up the call, saying, "Thank you for your cooperation." It was unbelievable. They had actually come to my apartment, intending to cause trouble, and then lied about being my family. How crazy was that? Hours later, my husband showed up at my parents' house, looking exhausted. He confirmed my suspicions. It was indeed my mother-in-law and Catherine who got arrested. They somehow found out where we were meeting and planned to stop me from going to Italy. Catherine's plan was to run to my husband at the airport, tell him, "Your wife ran off with another man," and then pretend to comfort him. Maybe she even thought she could take my place on our honeymoon. Did she really think she could just take over my spot and that her lie wouldn't be exposed when we got back? It was absurd and infuriating. Italy was ruined for me, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never forgive them for this. I thought their plan was ridiculous, but it was actually much worse than I imagined. After stopping me, my mother-in-law planned to take me to a man she had chosen for her own 50-year-old unemployed brother. Catherine's cousins were even waiting in a car to help. Just thinking about it made me shiver. If their plan worked, I'd be stuck with my mother-in-law's brother, and Catherine would be with my husband. My mother-in-law hoped that would break up my marriage. It was a horrible scheme. Luckily, my father-in-law overheard them talking and secretly called my husband. My husband was still at work, planning to head to the airport later, but as soon as he found out, he called me in a panic. By the time he rushed over, my mother-in-law and her group had already been taken away by the police. After sorting things out at the police station with my father-in-law, my husband came to see me, completely drained. He kept apologizing for what his mother and Catherine did, and for ruining our honeymoon. He tried his best, and seeing how exhausted he was, I couldn't blame him for what happened. But I decided that I would never forgive my mother-in-law and Catherine. From that day on, I stopped just reacting and started fighting back. First, I demanded money for all the damage they caused, repair costs for my apartment door that they broke, fees for the building management, and the cancellation fees for our honeymoon. They were furious because they thought I was just avoiding them, so they kicked my door and even smashed it with a fire extinguisher. It was a new, expensive door I had just installed, so fixing it was costly. On top of that, our honeymoon was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and canceling it wasn't cheap either. In total, everything they destroyed and the cancelled honeymoon came up to nearly $20,000. Of course, they tried to resist paying up. It's Bob's fault. He won't admit that he loves me. All I ever wanted was your happiness, Bob, my mother-in-law cried. Ah, I see. You think you're being kind, Bob, but if you won't pay, we're taking this to court, I said firmly. Court? If we go to court, we'll also bring up the fact that you tried to kidnap me. The amount you'll have to pay will increase even more. Hearing the word court, my mother-in-law started shaking, and Catherine burst into tears. You forgive me, right? I'm your precious little girl, Catherine pleaded. I'll never forgive you, my husband responded coldly. Catherine guessed at his harsh tone. But I love you so much. Bob, don't you love me too? There's no way I could love a woman who dates 5 guys at the same time and goes after a married man. W what? 5 guys? My mother-in-law looked at Catherine, shocked. I backed up my husband. You only started saying you love Bob after we got engaged, right? You never cared about him before. You just want what someone else has. My mother-in-law glared at Catherine. Clearly, Catherine was caught. Her eyes darted around before she pointed at my mother-in-law and screamed, You're the real culprit. You used me because you hated your daughter-in-law. What? You're blaming me? Bob, she's lying. I tried to stop this horrible plan. The two of them, who had been close just moments ago, started arguing and nearly fought each other. It was a sad display of how weak their bond really was. In the end, Catherine's parents and my father-in-law got involved, and they decided to split the cost in half. Catherine's parents, who had no idea about her disgraceful behavior, were deeply apologetic. We brought in a lawyer and filed a restraining order against Catherine and my mother-in-law. Naturally, my mother-in-law cried and begged us not to go through with it, but their plan had been so vicious that neither my husband nor I could ever forgive them. 3 years later, we were living peacefully with our newborn baby when a man visited our home. Dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, he introduced himself as Catherine's fiancé. I went back to Catherine's parents' house to greet them, and one of her old classmates mentioned that she was once supposed to steal Bob from you. When my husband mentioned Catherine's name for the first time in a while, I was surprised. Catherine's fiancé told us that he had met one of her classmates, who probably attended our wedding and saw Catherine's disgraceful behavior. I thought it was a joke at first, but Catherine's pale face made me worry. I'm sorry, but I had to look into things. You and Catherine were childhood friends, right? But you're not dating now, are you? He asked. Of course not. We've never dated, my husband replied firmly. Hearing this, the fiancé looked relieved. Then, is she seeing other men besides me? He wondered aloud. The Catherine I knew would date a different guy every day of the week. What? She even showed up at our wedding, uninvited, wearing a white dress and trying to sit at a family table. My husband added. No way, the fiancé muttered weakly. I guess I should expand my investigation to more people, not just me. With that, Catherine's fiancé left our house, looking dazed. Later, I heard they really did investigate further, and it revealed Catherine's messy dating history. It turns out her fiancé was the son of a prominent CEO, and his entire family was furious when they found out Catherine had been pretending to be a pure, respectable woman. She had been secretly dating multiple men while engaged, and when the truth came out, their engagement was cancelled, and she was even sued for damages. If Catherine hadn't tried to mess up our wedding just to steal my husband, she might have secured a life of luxury without anyone finding out the truth, but her real nature was bound to come out sooner or later. Now, my mother-in-law is upset because she can't see her first grandchild. She's eagerly waiting for news, while my father-in-law happily brings baby supplies over to our house. She's tried sending baby clothes through my father-in-law, but I return them without even opening them. As for Catherine, she's been dumped by her fiancé and is drowning in debt. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law can't see her beloved son and grandchild. It's like karma caught up with them both. Right now, being neighbors, my mother-in-law and Catherine argue every time they see each other. The neighbors who have to watch their constant bickering are definitely not enjoying it. Hey Megan, how about we visit a Miami Seaquarium on the second day, and then head to Key West on the third day? I heard there's a beautiful overseas highway there. That sounds great. I also want to try seafood at a Cuban restaurant. And I want to swim with the fish. Now that our son is turning 3, we're planning to take the honeymoon we never got to have. Our destination is Florida. Our main goal is to show our son the dolphins, and we also want to try all the local foods, especially Cuban cuisine. We haven't forgotten about our postponed Italy trip, but we decided to wait until our son is a little older. It might be far in the future, but if it's with my husband, I know we'll make it happen. I feel so happy and content every single day.